Hello and welcome to today's Historical Facts. This is the story of the Aba Women's Riot, a movement of courage and a massacre that history has tried to silence. To understand this tragedy, we need to step into the world of colonial Nigeria in 1929. The British had merged the northern and southern protectorates in 1914, creating what they called Nigeria. But it wasn't a nation built on unity, it was a colony designed for profit. In southeastern Nigeria, among the Igbo and Ibibio people, society had long been built on balance. Men and women shared governance, with women's councils playing critical roles in markets, family disputes, and community life. The market was not just an economic hub, it was the lifeblood of women's independence. But under British indirect rule, traditional systems were disrupted. The colonial administration propped up local warrant chiefs, men who often ruled without accountability. Corruption grew. Taxes were imposed, and in 1929, rumours spread that the British planned to extend direct taxation to women, a violation not only of justice, but of culture itself. The spark was small, but it lit a fire. In November 1929, a colonial census agent named Okugo visited a widow named Wanyerua in Oloko. He demanded she count her goats and people, implying that women would soon be taxed just like men. For Igbo women, this was an insult and a threat. Women were already burdened with feeding families, paying taxes through their husbands, and surviving in a colonial economy that stripped them of land rights. The rumour of taxation on women was the final straw. Nwanyerua refused, and instead she called upon the traditional system of sitting on a man, a form of women's collective protest. Word spread across towns and villages, drums were beaten, songs carried messages, and within days tens of thousands of women had gathered, demanding answers from colonial officers and warrant chiefs alike. The Aba Women's Riot wasn't chaos, it was organised resistance. Women staged demonstrations at local courts, markets and administrative centres. They sang songs of defiance, mocked corrupt chiefs, and in some cases tore down colonial buildings. Their methods reflected tradition. When women felt wronged, they used collective shame as a weapon. They danced, chanted, and sometimes besieged a man's house until he confessed or corrected his wrongdoing. Now that same tactic was turned against colonial power. By December, an estimated 25,000 women were mobilized across southeastern Nigeria. Igbo, Ibibio, Andoni, and Opobo women joined hands, an unprecedented display of unity. The message was clear. The colonial government could not simply dictate policies without reckoning with the women who sustained society. But to the British authorities, this wasn't a legitimate political protest. They called it a riot. They saw thousands of women as an unruly mob. The colonial administration panicked. District officers summoned troops, police, and even warships to suppress what they described as disorder. In towns like Opobo, Owerri, and Aba, tensions boiled over. On December 16, 1929, in Opobo, colonial troops opened fire on unarmed women protesters. Bullets tore through crowds that had come armed only with voices and song. In Aba, at least 32 women were killed in a single day of shooting. By the end, over 50 women lay dead across the region, their bodies a chilling testament to the violence of colonial power. Imagine the scene. Women in vibrant wrappers lying lifeless in the market square, where hours earlier they had traded goods and laughed with neighbours. Mothers cut down before their children's eyes. Entire communities shaken, not by war between nations, but by the very government that claimed to bring civilization. Reports from missionaries and local witnesses confirmed the brutality. Women were shot in the back while fleeing. Others were wounded, beaten or imprisoned. Families were torn apart. Yet in official British reports, the language was sanitized. They spoke of necessary force of restoring order. The massacre was buried under colonial bureaucracy. For the women of Aba, though, it was unforgettable. The songs of protest became elegies of mourning. British made reforms. They curtailed the power of warrant chiefs, slowed attempts to tax women, and made small concessions. But no officer or soldier was ever held accountable for the killings. Justice, in any meaningful sense, never came. The Aba Women's Riot, or Women's War as it is sometimes called, remains one of the most important anti-colonial struggles in African history. It showed the power of women's collective action, long before the era of independence movements. For the Igbo and Ibibio, it reinforced the idea that women were not passive subjects of history, but active defenders of their communities. For Nigeria, it planted seeds of resistance that would grow into larger nationalist movements. And for the world, it left behind a difficult question. Why are women's sacrifices so often erased from the record? The massacre of 1929 was not just about taxation. It was about dignity, autonomy, and the refusal to be silenced. When we walk through the markets of Aba today, it's easy to forget that these grounds once ran with blood. But memory lingers, in songs, in oral histories, in the unmarked graves of women who gave their lives for justice. The Aba Women's Riot wasn't just a moment in Nigerian history. It was a statement to the world that when injustice becomes unbearable, even the most marginalized will rise, and they will rise together. More than 90 years later, the struggle of these women still speaks. Their voices echo across generations, reminding us that freedom is never handed down. It is demanded, sometimes at great cost. So the next time we think of colonial history, let us not only remember kings, generals, and treaties. Let us remember the women of Aba, the market women, the mothers, the daughters, who stood unarmed before the guns of empire and paid with their lives. This was not just a riot. It was resistance, it was sacrifice, and it was a massacre the world must never forget.